So welcome back all you retro bikers, welcome back to the channel. And we're going into a new year and I'm actually doing a bit of a season of videos and they're all going to be linked, as you'll see. And this one, it's quite a serious one actually. Did the government kill motorcycling in the 70s and the 80s, or did they save it? And if you know anything about the time period, it's all about all the restrictions and the training and how it's panned out today. And I'll be looking at that and then making my own decision. But you might disagree, and if you do, that's fine. So as ever, please leave your comments below and support the channel. And I really appreciate your support. Back in 1960, the government at the time made 250cc the learner bike. And by 1971, the government had a rethink. And what they come up with, you had to be 17 to ride these 250cc bikes. Which also meant if you were 16, you must be restricted to a moped of 49cc and pedals. So the battle began, and the government thought that 16-year-olds were going to ride these type of bikes, the step-through moped, which were available freely all through the UK. What they didn't bargain on was the Japanese and the other manufacturers to make 16er mopeds, and there became a competition now to see how fast you could go on these machines. I've just listed a few here, and that's going to be the same throughout the video. But the Japanese certainly made some great machines, so did the Italians and the Germans. So the roads were getting a lot quicker in the early 70s, and so was the manufacturing of these type of bikes. So if you were 17, you could buy a really top performance bike that was equivalent to a 500 or a 650 a decade earlier, and people were buying them. And again, I've just listed a few of the great bikes made from the era. So by 1973, things are starting to hot up, and they did you had to wear a helmet if you rode a motorcycle on UK roads, and that was the law. And a lot of people disagreed with this. And in 1977, because people hadn't ridden the step-through mopeds and gone on to sport 16er mopeds, they did a ban on these as well.
Although the government have turned down an inquiry, they have put through some new legislation that comes into force on August the 1st. 16-year-olds will only be able to ride a moped with a maximum design speed of 30 miles an hour. But why is the problem being tackled this way?
I think that the present top speeds are very often sort of 60 and 70 miles an hour. And this is a pretty lethal weapon in the hands of a sometimes untrained 17-year-old or 16-year-old, for example. And if we can cut it back to 30 miles an hour maximum design speed, then that's an improvement.
But can you cut it back to 30 miles an hour?
Okay, look, nothing is tinker-proof, I agree. Maybe by messing around with it, someone can zoom it up to 35 or 40 miles an hour, but at least we've got it back to 30 from 60 or 70, which is the maximum at the moment.
So the manufacturers' new tactics, even though the bikes were slower, they made them look better. In a way, they made them more like a full-size motorbike with better braking and a better feel. And it's a great way to be introduced to the motorcycle world. Obviously they were slower, but people had a lot of fun on these as well. So a shock to some people in 78 with 77 new pages to learn in the highway code. But manufacturers like Honda and a lot of the Japanese bikes were concentrating on commuters as well. And you could be sold to at least 3 generations to the family. It was just a great idea, and I think the government missed a trick on this one.
Standing in a bus queue,
sitting in the traffic,
letting other people find the way you go.
it's time you broke away.
Believe in freedom, believe in Honda.
Going when you like, from door to door, your Honda bike and you.
Believe in freedom, believe in Honda.
Going where you like, your Honda bike and you.
I'll be touching on this subject, the culture, in the next few videos. And when you think about it, they were selling these magazines to school children. And I'm only joking here, but the influence it had on the young minds was just incredible, and what I was one of them. So by the early 80s, they perfected the two-stroke, and it was the Wild West out there. Get your mum to get some hire purchase, pay a few pound a week, and you were on the road. And it could be Donington Park or Donington Avenue, it didn't really matter. These bikes really performed. So it was D-Day. I'm not going to go into all the law changes here. And this is a picture in Liverpool in the early 80s. And these people are still protesting of the 1973 helmet law. But it was devastating for many people. And many people lost interest in motorcycling because it just become too much for them. And I've changed my view over the years, and I'll talk about that at the end. But for certainly, it was a very difficult time for motorcyclists. So before we look at the 125 machines of the early 80s, in 1979, the official government figures were 21,277 killed or seriously injured on the UK roads. Just have to pause for a minute on this. The 125 machines, well, they were great looking machines. These are some of the early ones on the 12 bhp and the weight restrictions on the bikes. And it'd be very interesting to comment below on your experience on these machines and your learning and your experiences in you taking the test, the two-part test for the first time. So by 1988, the impact of all the changes was felt. Motorcycle sales now fell below 100,000, and but nevertheless, the bikes got better, and there were more. These are the later bikes, later in the decade, and they were just proper bikes, weren't they? And again, I keep on apologising for not showing it all, but please comment below or put a picture of your own biking in the comments. I really appreciate it. But they certainly made some fantastic bike going into the 90s. So by 1990, we've got the start of the modern testing with the CBT being introduced. And the figures are dramatically dropped by 91, and Mr. Major's obviously not talking about that in this particular clip. But nevertheless, they had really changed from the 79. And I've gone a step further. 2013, there was 5,187,000 seriously injured or fatalities, and this was down by 76% from 1979. So I leave that judgment for yourself. First of all, I hope you enjoyed that short video or short reminder of what actually happened back then in the 70s and the 80s, with all the legislation, the laws, the government involvement. And the answer for me clearly is it was a good idea. But I'm old and I'm wiser than today, and back then I thought it was the end of the world. And I left motorcycling for a number of years because I just couldn't believe all the hassle it caused. But looking back now, what a great decision. And I'd be very interested for your opinion of what the governments did back then. And my next series of videos following on from this relates back to the law changes, because it's about the culture, it's about the manufacturing and all the different things that happened during this period in motorcycling. And just remember, this is just a memory channel, and I really appreciate your support. So till next time.